Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. This is a legislative briefing for a bill that is currently before the New York legislature. The bill number is A1115C in the Assembly and S309B in the Senate. We call it the Protect Our Ballots Act, or sometimes the Hybrid Ban Bill. And the briefing is being hosted by Assemblymember Paulin, who I see is just joining us. And so I think see her popping on and off there. But as soon as she's available, I know that things have been very hectic. We unfortunately had this very tragic shooting yesterday that I'm sure we're all still a little upset and in shock with. Each one of these is very, very difficult for us, but we do need to just focus on this, which is also a very important issue, voting, which really underlies the whole fabric of our culture and our democracy and the decisions we make. So the decisions that we make about voting are very important. And we have a really illustrious panel here to talk to you about this bill. And we will also briefly touch on a few other bills that that our coalition is supporting. I'll introduce myself. I'm Lulu Friesdat. I am the founder of Smart Legislation, as well as the executive director of Smart Elections. And both of these groups are working to make sure that US elections are secure, fair, accessible, well administered, and publicly verifiable. And the panelists that we have for you today are people who are working in their organizations to really further those goals. And we're really delighted to have them with us. It's an honor. They've done some really profound work. I see Dale is here. Dale, can you say hello? He's Dale works with Assemblymember Paulin.
Hi, I'm here on behalf of the Assembly Member's Office.
Do you want to just say hello and get us started?
Yeah, I can definitely say hello. We're glad to have all the speakers here who are going to speak in support of the bill. We're hoping that we can be able to move it this year, and we're really excited about the potential changes that it'll make to improve our elections.
Terrific. So we're just going to get started. I am going to share my screen, and we'll also, I want to just try to do things that are in keeping with with an accessible program. So each person, as we introduce them, will hopefully try to give a visual description. Dale is not on camera, so he's just showing us his name, Dale Barbaria. Is that right, Dale?
Yeah.
Okay, and a black box. But I am on camera. I am a pretty pale woman with long brown hair. It's got a little bit of a wave to it today. And I'm in a green suit. I'm at Assemblymember Paulin's office with some lovely black and white art in the background. And I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and just start to talk to you a little bit about this bill, A1115C. I'm going to go by the assembly numbers since we are in the assembly, what it does do and what it doesn't do, and kind of the journey that we've been on through with this bill and why it is so critically important at this time. Let's see. Okay, so can I just share that screen? Okay, so this is our organization, Smart Legislation, and you'll see that we have a picture of one of the hybrid voting machines here. It has a little saying, "I do not consent to vote on this device." The bill A1115C bans two types of voting machines, and I just want to check with you. Is everybody seeing my screen who is able to see? And I'll describe the screen for those who can't. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, great. So this is a slide, and as I said, it has a picture of the Express Vote XL. And this is what's called a hybrid voting machine. It has combined multiple functions into one unit. So it works both as a ballot marking device and as a scanner tabulator. And security experts have said that this design is flawed. And one of the things that's flawed about it, it has really many problems, but one of the key things that's wrong with it is that as the ballot goes into the ballot box, you see this little sort of very small, skinny area. That is actually where what they call the ballot sits. It's not even really a ballot. It's a thin summary card on thermal paper, and the ballot gets whisked up and back under the other side, and it passes back under the print head on its way to the ballot box. And this is a concern because a paper ballot is our ultimate representation of the voter's choice. And if the paper ballot goes back under the print head, security experts say either by mistake or design, that paper ballot could be changed. And it's very concerning. And it's not just concerning to us. It is in fact concerning to quite a few people. And you can see here, these are all organizations that signed on to letters against the express vote itself. And we actually have even more than that now. I will show you another letter that we published just this week from 70 security and elections experts, as well as good government groups, and a separate letter that civil rights leaders authored saying that they support this legislation, A1115C, and are very concerned about the hybrid voting machines. This is our top priority this session, to pass A1115C. This is a quote from one of the security experts. These all-in-one devices pose extraordinary risks for the voters of New York, and I urge you to reject their use. And that is Richard DeMillo, who is one of the leading election security experts in the country. He works at Georgia Tech. And these are some other bills that we are going to briefly touch on today. We talked about this bill. We do support the New York Voting Rights Act. We know that it is in process in the Senate and hope that it will also move in the Assembly. These other bills, just so you know, that we are talking about today, they are all moving forward in the Senate. So A1115C is on the calendar in the Senate as S309B. Another bill that we kind of call our safety belt bill, so that if for some reason A1115C does not pass, this would still help us to reject voting machines on the basis of security. And that is A829A, that is on the Senate calendar. And another bill that I believe that the co-chair of the New York State Board of Elections is here to advocate for, and that we support very strongly, is also on the floor calendar. That is a bill to make sure that the public has access to digital ballot images. Oh, actually it passed the Senate. I looked at it last night. And we are also very much supporting Board of Election reforms, especially for hiring, training, and data transparency. So, and I'm actually gonna stop sharing my screen right now because I was gonna show you this quote from Douglas Kellner, but since he's here in person, it's better to let him speak for himself. I did check in with him this morning, mainly because I had a conversation with one of the Assembly members' staff yesterday, and they were still under the impression that the State Board of Elections was opposing this bill, and that is not the case. This bill has gone through a lot of research, a lot of vetting, and a lot of redrafting, and it's a very, very tight bill that was carefully drafted and reviewed by election security and auditing experts, and we did work closely with the State Board of Elections, and I believe that Douglas Kellner, he said to me in an email that he is supporting the bill. And do you want to speak for yourself, Doug, about your position? Thank you for being here, by the way, and please do give a quick visual description for those who are not, for the visually impaired who are with us. Are you muted? You're muted, Doug. Please unmute.
There we go.
Okay, great.
All right, so, I'm confirming that I have worked with legislative staff and with several members of both the Senate and the Assembly on this bill for 3 years. I did the initial draft mainly designed to remove from New York law the authorization for direct recording electronic voting machines.
And you want to, just for people who don't know what a DRE or direct record electronic machine is, why we would really want to ban those?
Well, those are machines that where the voter casts their ballot on the machine and the machine counts the vote directly. In New York, the law does still require a voter verifiable paper audit trail. But we have never certified a direct recording electronic voting machine. And I think that there's a consensus that having hand-marked paper ballots using scanners is the better way to go. with the need for ballot marking devices for those who want to use it for whatever reason, but mainly for people who would have difficulty hand marking a paper ballot. So that was the original thought of the legislation. It's expanded considerably to ban hybrid voting machines. Now, a hybrid voting machine is where the ballot marking device and the scanner are in the same equipment cabinet. And Professor Apfel and several others have said that that design is a flaw because of the possibility that the ballot could be altered after it's been verified by the voter, but before it's scanned. We at the State Board of Elections have examined that issue quite thoroughly. And while it's theoretically possible, from a practical point of view, it would be so difficult to accomplish that we certified the Dominion ice machine. And then on subsequent review, we reviewed additional security protocols and determined that it was not realistic to the concern that that particular machine could alter the ballot between the time it's been verified by the voter and scanned. And I liken it to securing the gold in Fort Knox. It is theoretically possible to steal the gold in Fort Knox, but it's not very realistic in view of the numerous security features. And if you've watched an Ocean's 11 movie, you get an idea of what would have to be accomplished in order to steal the gold at Fort Knox, or I liken it to change the printing routine for the Dominion ice printer. But nevertheless,
let me just jump in. So
yeah.
and we are on a bit of a time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I really appreciate you being here. But what I do want to say is that we want to be like Fort Knox here in New York. We want to make sure that our voting machines are secure and accurate, and that the public has full confidence. And the best way to do that, to make us like Fort Knox, is to make sure that even if there is any possibility that a paper ballot could be changed, that we're not allowing that in. And my understanding from your email is that you are supporting the bill. And that
I do support the bill because ideally it makes more sense to separate the two functions of the ballot marking device and the scanner.
Terrific. And that is also something that really helps with well-administered elections, because it helps with speeding along the lines, because some people can vote on the ballot marking device and some people can mark their ballots by hand. And we're going to get into that shortly, but I really do appreciate you being here. And I also think that Doug wanted to advocate for the bill that I mentioned that has already passed the Senate, which would allow the public access for digital ballot images, which is another way to boost confidence. And you're very much in support of that bill as well, right, Doug?
Absolutely. And,
okay. I think I had just given the bill number for that. The bill number on that one is A1115C. And I'll put that in the chat, but I do want to just move on. So we have some excellent, and Doug, do you want to just give a quick visual description of yourself for those who aren't able to see you?
You could do it.
Doug is a charming white man with big glasses and a long beard in an office at the State Board of Elections. I want to introduce Andrea Miller now. She's a legendary civil rights leader. Those of us who know her, and she's an advisor to Smart Elections. We have all been just amazed by all that she's been able to do. So Andrea, please, she's the a founding board member and the executive director of Center for Common Ground. Just tell us briefly about the work that you do and your personal experience with these type of, and I'm going to just clarify, there are two main things that this bill does. It bans hybrid voting machines, and it also bans a certain type of setup, which we call a universal use setup, where everyone has to vote on the same touchscreen ballot marking device. And it bans universal use setups by mandating that all polling locations have the option for a hand marked paper ballot or a ballot marking device. Both options have to be available. And talk to us, Andrea, about your experience where that has not been the case and why it's been such a problem, especially for communities of color. Thank you. And give us the visual description.
Thank you very much, Lulu. I am Andrea Miller. I am an African-American Cherokee woman. I have long hair pulled back and my hair is in dreads, and I wear very, very, very large glasses. I work for Center for Common Ground. We are very involved in working in what we call voter suppression states to ensure that underrepresented voters, specifically community of color voters, have the ability to vote. And one of the things that we do is we look at the election conditions, the landscape conditions, and we work very, very, very hard to prevent as many electoral problems and pitfalls for our voters as possible. And so the reason I'm speaking today is I want to be the fence for the great state of New York to ensure that we prevent suppression or voter disenfranchisement by technology. One of my first experiences, and it was with a DRE machine, was in Virginia in 2013 when I chose my candidates, and when the review screen came up, those weren't the candidates that I originally chose. Now, understand, I'm also a computer professional, having spent 28 years teaching various IT courses at community colleges and Johns Hopkins University. So I have always been very, very concerned about how people vote and creating unintended consequences. I want everybody to think how many of you know people over 50, mothers, aunts, grandmothers who struggle making use of a smartphone. This is a device that is in their possession that they have the ability to examine and use at any time that they want. When we look at elections, people that are over 50 are the most reliable voting demographic in New York, just as they are in virtually every other state of the union. So if people over 50 can struggle with the use of a device that is in their possession every day, imagine those same people struggling with a device that they see once, maybe at the most twice during the year. Our experience in Georgia, where they do have the universal use or everyone votes on touchscreen machines, was really unfortunate in that in many urban settings, we had voters who, when confronted with the use of the machine, required an extraordinary long time to vote, creating lines that lasted 8 to 10 hours. So we do not want to ever see that in New York. New York, you are a city. You are a state of very, very hardworking people. Many of your workers are hourly. And if they have to wait a long time in line to vote, that may mean they may not be able to vote. Hourly workers literally have 30 minutes, no more than an hour on their lunch hour. If it's 2 hours to vote, this means disenfranchisement for working people. And I know that no one in the General Assembly is attempting to do anything like that. The other issue that we run into with voting machines is when people vote with pencil and paper, we know everyone has pretty much mastered the use or at least understand it. Our disabled voters, we have devices that will accommodate their special needs. It is very, very important always in an election that people feel confident that when they vote, the person or people that they voted for, those are the people who actually get those votes. If you are utilizing any equipment where there is a receipt and the receipt has a barcode, we humans do not as yet read barcode. So very, very, very important. As I said, I want to be the fence that prevents New York State from tumbling down that cliff and becoming, by technology, a voter suppression, voter disenfranchisement state. Lulu, do you need anything else?
I think that was great. And those lines that Andrea is talking about, they have been associated with universal use voting machines all over the country. And it's very clear to understand why that would be the case if you have 50 voters who are trying to vote and 40 of them can come in and get a paper ballot, and those who are able to can mark that with a pen, and then the 10 people who really need to use the ballot marking device can get access to it immediately without a long wait. Then both of those groups of people can move forward more rapidly and everybody can vote in a way that's comfortable for them and more quickly. And so we have seen these really insanely long lines, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you a video of some of these lines because I've never seen lines like this. And this was in Georgia in 2020 when they did implement these universal voting machines around the state. And these are exceptionally long lines. This was in both the primary and the general election. And this is not just in Georgia. We know that in Georgia there are other, other policies that contribute to these long lines. But one of the things to really be aware of is that when everyone has to vote on the same machine, on that ballot marking device, one way to implement voter suppression is by making sure that certain locations don't get enough of those machines. And that is just a simple thing that does happen where certain communities don't get enough of the machines, and then automatically the lines will pile up. And one of the things that the bill A1115C does is it makes sure that no matter what, voters have two options, two different ways to vote at every polling location. And that is one of the primary things that we did in terms of rewriting the bill this session, was to make sure that that those two options are available. So I think that the best thing now is to turn to Rasheta Bunting. Rasheta is an amazing disability rights advocate. She's a member of a lot of organizations. I can probably tell you just a few of them. Probably can't get all of them in. She's the president of the Vanguard chapter of Greater New York for the National Federation of the Blind. She's the president and founder of One Heart, One Vision. And she's also a member of Disabled in Action and ADAPT. She's a blind single parent of 2. And she's also a podcaster. So I'm excited to start listening to her podcast. Rasheta, please go ahead and unmute yourself. And great, I see you're unmuted, and give us a brief visual description. Talk to us a little bit about the work that you do, and then why you're supporting A1115C and your personal experiences. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a African-American, dark complexion woman I too have long dreadlocks, but they're up in a bun right now, and I'm wearing a red shirt. So the work that I do I'm a voter advocate and a civic engagement organizer for the Bronx, which is one of the most disenfranchised neighborhoods in the United States. I'm the voice of the disabled community in the Bronx. So I work out, so I'm the voice of the disabled community in the Bronx, and I speak to local government officials and make sure that access is met on all levels. Now, the issue with this machine, I'm here to speak about the accessibility aspect. I'm not gonna just repeat what Andrea so wonderfully said about voter suppression, because if we're talking about voter suppression, the disability community is one of the highest groups that experience voter suppression, but the least talked about. So with this, the new machine, the screen is an issue. I'm only speaking as a blind person. The screen is an issue. I'm a self-identified blind person, meaning that I do have usable vision, but when people who aren't disabled see me with my cane, they automatically assume that I'm blind, so I go with it. It's easier to explain. So when the person who has usable vision, who is low vision, visually impaired, a lot of us look at a screen, we get a glare. And the glare prevents us from voting independently. And we fought for many, many years to get devices such as ballot marking devices and poll sites so we can have an independent vote. I've been voting for 30 years since I turned 18, and I have very distinct memories of going into a poll site and being handed a paper ballot without the BMD being there, and going into the booth and having someone tell me, a relative, tell me, pull the lever this way or mark it this, and then you can pull the lever or fill out the ballot for me. Now, as a self-identified blind person, who's to say that they actually did the right thing? Now, this machine will take away, as a blind person, our independence, voting independence, because I'm not able to look at this screen due to a glare. The ballot summary on the screen is really tiny and the writing is small. Also, it was spoken about with the extremely long lines. Not saying that a person with a disability can't wait in lines, because we do. But there are some disabilities, and I've been in the field of disability. I'm a special educator, a certified special educator. I've worked with federal agencies that deal specifically with disabled persons, such as the Social Security Administration. I've been in the field of disability for 25 years, so I consider myself the expert with this. There are some disability groups or classifications that aren't able to wait in line, such as a person on the spectrum disorder, autism spectrum disorder, or a person who may have a traumatic brain injury or suffers from a seizure disorder, where waiting on the line wouldn't be conducive for them due to the long wait in the crowds. And if everyone, and I must say that I'm in what I consider in disability field an integrationalist. We're here, we're not going anywhere. We want to be integrated into community with non-disabled people. We want to work with non-disabled people. We want to live life and love like everyone else alongside non-disabled people, but we also want the equity. And a really long line where a person with an invisible disability, such as ASD.
Electrification, if we are not already working on a lower.
Excuse me? Okay, that might have been a mistake. So, sorry guys, I lost my train of thought. But a situation where a person who may not be able to wait on the line because of an invisible disability, that too is voter suppression and disenfranchisement. And this is why I am in total support of this hybrid ban bill. Thank you. Hello?
You're muted, Lulu.
The classic Zoom mute. I thank you so much for being here, Rasheta, and for all your hard work. I did just put a link into the chat. It is not just Rasheta who has struggled with certain ballot marking devices and is concerned about these particular models coming in. The Express Vote Excel, which is a hybrid voting machine, which would be banned by this bill, had 27 pages of complaints from voters with disabilities when it was implemented in Pennsylvania. And those included, as she said, like not being able to see the ballot behind this glass and it's a very small ballot and the print is pretty small on the ballot itself, and many other issues. There were actually times when these machines have really struggled with very severe performance problems in the field. The actual machinery came open, showing the guts, the machinery of the machine underneath. They did have long lines, not just in Georgia, but in Philadelphia, in other states where these machines have been implemented. And I will put a couple other links in the chat. There was a situation in Northampton County, Pennsylvania, where the machine actually miscounted tens of thousands of votes and declared the wrong candidate the winner. So these machines have struggled. And what we are looking for in New York with this bill is to set standards. We're going to set certain standards for performance and for security that all voting machine vendors will have to comply with. So we are not picking on any particular vendor. We are looking for high standards for our voting equipment. So we just have a few minutes left. I'm going to turn now to another amazing advocate, Lurie Daniel Favors from the Center for Law and Social Justice. Again, it's such an honor to have you with us. Please give a brief visual description and talk briefly about the work that you do, which is so profound, and why you decided to support A1115C so strongly.
Thank you, Lulu, and to all the co-panelists. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. My name is Lurie Daniel Favors. I'm a woman of African descent, medium brown or light brown, depending on who you're comparing me to. I have my hair in very short locks cut into a bob that are sister locks, and I also wear very large glasses and have on a brown sweater, and am zooming from my home office, also known as my living room, depending on what time my kids get home. I am the executive director at the Center for Law and Social Justice, and we are a racial justice law center who envision a politically sophisticated Black electorate that is able to marshal the power and resources necessary for our communities to thrive. And one of the great concerns that we have about these machines, and some of the reasons that I support this ban and that we as an organization do as well, are the following. We are, in our community, we have a long history dating back to the mid-1980s of being very heavily present in the voter rights and voter protection community. And one of the things that we have become increasingly concerned about in recent years is the impact of disinformation on voters of African descent throughout the state of New York. And unfortunately, these machines are of the sort that contribute to a lot of concerns that our community members have about confirming the accuracy of the ballots that they cast and ensuring that who they intended to vote for was actually who they did vote for. These machines do not allow you to walk away with the confidence that if you selected candidate A and that was the candidate of your choice, that is actually going to be the person for whom your vote is cast. Receiving a barcode upon completion of entering your items into the machine does not a receipt make, as most folks in our community, myself included, do not have the capacity to read a barcode, as was previously noted. And we have no way of being able to have confidence that the persons we tried to vote for actually were the persons who were recipients of our votes. And because these machines, as you've heard already, require you to vote on the screen, it requires a facility and familiarity with digital processing that unfortunately most of the folks in our most reliable voting bloc, our seniors, simply do not have. We know that mistakes happen. In fact, I am almost ashamed to admit, but not really, that even though I taught people about ranked choice voting, my organization had ranked choice voting workshops out the wazoo. I made a mistake on my ballot. And I had to get another ballot during my ranked choice voting experience last year. And I can only imagine what that would have been like if I were casting my ballot literally on the screen itself, not behind the protected table with the flaps that allows me the privacy I need to make my decisions in private. But if I were realizing that I had made a mistake on that machine and had to then attempt to figure out which of my rankings I got wrong, and this would also happen regardless of it being a ranked choice election or not, but trying to figure out who I actually did vote for, because again, I don't have my paper receipt, and then trying to re-enter my ballot with the help of some wonderful poll worker who hopefully got enough training on how to recalibrate my machine and reorient it so that I can start over, all while people are lining up behind me, impatiently waiting for their opportunity to cast their vote. I don't know how many of you have gone to a bank recently where you are waiting for the one ATM machine that actually has money in it while you are trying to figure out how to get your money out. Perhaps you have to deposit some into this account and take some out of the other account. Maybe you took out too much, want to put a little back. All the while, the folks behind you who are on the remaining 15 minutes of their lunch break are hoping that you get it right this time. The pressure that adds and the frustration that lends to what is a very serious process, electing the people who are going to vote for us, that should not be a stress that our voters are going to have to endure, in particular because one of the other concerns that we have, and unfortunately, Lulu, you're gonna have to stop me in a minute, I can just rattle these off. One of the other concerns that we have is that in addition to not being able to readily adapt to that situation where I would want to change my ballot or perhaps I cast the wrong ballot and need a redo, in addition to that, we also know that Black voters and Black communities tend to be the communities that get the worst of the machines. And I'm not being hyperbolic. Literally, one of the first lawsuits that was filed at the Center for Law and Social Justice was Ashby Board of Elections. And this was a very successful class action lawsuit that we had to file under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act because we kept getting the machines. And this wasn't even high technology. These were the crank machines that you had to pull the lever on. We got the worst of those machines. We got the machines with the arms that would stick. We got the machines that couldn't plug in properly. We got the machines that were miscalibrated. And as a result, we had to file a lawsuit invoking the constitutional protections or legislative protections of the Voting Rights Act to ensure that the machines that we got were not going to be racially distributed such that Black and brown communities ended up getting the worst of the worst. I can only imagine what it's going to look like when we have the costs that are attenuated with these machines, the extreme costs that frankly our Board of Elections cannot manage to afford at this moment for investing in other things that we actually do need to spend that money on. But I'm thinking about what it would cost Bedford-Stuyvesant voters or the Board of Elections in Brooklyn to be able to provide enough of these machines in communities like mine where I vote, where the lines are always long, even when we have a low turnout. I cannot imagine what it was going to be like when our seniors, our young people, our parents with their children are waiting behind the one or two machines that you might have gotten placed in our local schools for us to cast a ballot, as we're waiting for the dear voter who is the front of the line who happened to realize that they made a mistake and need to start over. And so this scenario is not drawing from something that is unlikely. I am literally talking about things that have already happened in elections in New York City, in predominantly Black voting communities, where we are already seeing the misdistribution of resources so that we don't have enough resources to effectively manage our elections. And these machines, which have additional issues related to calibration. If I'm hitting a button on the machine that says candidate A, but it is tossing me over to candidate C, how long do you think the voters in line are going to wait for our poll workers, who again are not paid enough and who are not trained well enough to be able to figure out how to recalibrate the machine, something that is far more complex than the smartphones that they actually hold in their wallet every single day. There has been sufficient reporting on these machines throughout the country that indicates that they are not reliable, that they do not provide an accurate tally of the votes that were cast, and they do not allow for the confidence that we need in a time when people are politicizing the big lie as an election get out the vote strategy. And so we are very hopeful that as you consider the costs of these machines, as you consider the impact of not having the technology at hand to be able to ensure their accuracy, as you consider what it is going to mean to have to figure out how to get enough of these machines in enough poll sites to minimize the number of lines and the time that people are going to wait. And as you consider the fact that these machines have been reported, credibly reported, to have miscounted thousands of votes such that they can throw elections simply by the sheer number of inaccuracies. I cannot for the life of me understand why it is there is a desire to move forward with these types of machines injected into our elections at a time like this when we are dealing with so many levels of voter suppression, particularly for Black voters in the state of New York. And those are just some of the many reasons that we at the Center for Law and Social Justice are encouraging our elected officials to look at this legislation and to support a ban on any machine that is going to inject this level of uncertainty and this level of inability to confirm the accuracy of our elections at a time when literally fears about elections being stolen are driving entire electoral campaigns and outcomes in ways that should frighten every single one of us. So Lulu, I'll stop there. My apologies for taking more time than was necessary.
No need to apologize. We're grateful for your passion. And just to be clear, the Center for Law and Social Justice is advocating for the passage of A1115C, yes?
Yes, we are indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really great to have you here. And we just have a little bit of time left. So I just want to quickly introduce Sancho because we're really lucky to have him here. And I do want to just talk about timing a little bit since Lurie brought up the issue of timing. This is an issue that I liken to climate change. And the reason why I say that is because climate change is something that doesn't seem urgent right now because the weather might be beautiful and we all might be having a lovely day, but we know that this is a really deadly issue coming at us and that once it has arrived, it will be irreversible. And the issue of these voting machines is very similar. Everything seems fine now. We are using the voting machines we've always used, and it's easy to just think that everything will continue to be fine. But once these new technologies are certified, contracted, and distributed into our communities, it will be almost irreversible. That is when people will start to get alarmed and there will be tons of media and people will be freaking out, but it will be too late at that point. So now is the time. We have this window. These machines are in the process of being certified by the State Board of Elections currently, and they need statutory guidance. They cannot, they have said, reject these machines without better statutes on the book. So the ball is in the court of the legislature, and it is their job right now to take a look at that basket and get the ball through it. This is your window. I am really glad that Sancho is with us. Is actually, I'm going to say, legendary election commissioner. He was featured in the film Hacking Democracy. He allowed a test run of his voting machines and hackers did successfully hack them in a demo election. And so you just have about 2 minutes left, but we're so grateful that you're here. And I want you to just talk about why you believe that it is so important to focus on security and making sure people are confident in their vote. Thank you. And give us that visual description. I'm sorry.
Yes. I'm an older Latino male. Not much hair left on my head at this point. Let's put it this way. I'm in my 7th decade. I worked as an election official in Leon County for 30 years, approximately 30 years. I'm continuing to work in the area of election security because one of the things that I found when I came into the field in the 1980s was that election officials had very little understanding of technology at all. They were completely dependent upon the vendor. And this tradition or this point is still being manifested now in the 2020 era, where in fact election officials don't understand how their voting equipment works. They are very, very much dependent upon their vendor, and they do what their vendor tells them to do. Because the last election official may have had an ES&S, now that means that they want to have the latest ES&S device. That is not the appropriate way to select voting equipment. Not listening to the vendor is a very good point because it's the equivalent of listening to a used car salesman telling you what you need as opposed to you telling the vendor what you need. We need verifiable systems. The ballot marking devices, which are now coming on the market, are sold to election officials as easier to use, as simpler, as meaning you'll have less work to do. That is not why we have voting equipment. It is not to make it simpler for the administrator. It is for each vote to be counted as the voter intended to be counted. And that means that we have to audit these. The optical scanner, where the voter marks a full piece of paper in their own handwriting, if possible, is the gold standard for auditing a ballot. In fact, when we allowed the red team attack on our systems, one of the things that we found was, even though the system could be hacked, if you then hand examined every one of the pieces of paper, it would catch the hack. It would in fact not be determinative, and you can in fact put the correct vote to the voter's intent. That is critical. And when you use the ballot marking devices, this makes the audit function questionable now as to whether or not you're actually verifying the voter's intent or you're verifying the machine's intent. And that's why a voter verified paper ballot is necessary. Quite frankly, I had the ability and went to Valdosta when Valdosta was using the ES&S ballot marking devices and deploying them in 2020. And what we found was a disastrous lines formed in those Valdosta precincts. Because in fact, ballot marking devices take much longer to use, particularly as we've heard from the senior citizens who are not very skilled at using touchscreens as the normal way to communicate with individuals. We've gone away from the touchscreens, which is the DREs, but now the vendors wanting to make more money, in my opinion, because the dirty little secret in the elections industry is companies don't make their money through the sales of voting equipment. The voting machine vendors make their money with supplying the support to every one of those ballot marking devices, which are in the thousands, and they charge a monthly fee for every one of those devices, as opposed to the optical or the digital scanners, which require much fewer of those. And so the companies make less money with the digital optical scanner as opposed to the express system that is being talked about here. I am at 100% in support of A1115C because of its recognition that you need to have this voter verifiable medium to ensure that voters can in fact cast that vote and have it counted as they intended. Without that, you have nothing.
Thank you so much for being here, Ian. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who was able to be here with us today. And for those who are watching afterward, I think that all of these speakers have really made the persuasive case that A1115C will protect New York voters and candidates because it is going to set a high standard for our voting machines that all vendors will have to meet. I do want to make sure that Assembly members understand that it is not going to cost counties any more money because there is no mandate for new voting machines to be purchased. Counties can continue to use the voting machines that they have. The bill specifically says they may use, maintain, and replace current voting machines for as long as they want. And so there's no additional expense. This bill is only going to save counties money because when you have the hybrid and universal use voting systems, the machines themselves are more expensive and you have to buy more of them for every location to be able to service the same number of voters. And so those costs can skyrocket quickly, as you have heard from our speakers. We do want to point out that we very much support ballot marking devices being available in every polling location for voters who want to use them. That is so important as we have voters with disabilities who are our friends and loved ones, and we know how important it is for them to vote independently, privately, and securely. They want their votes to count, and they want to have confidence that their vote counts. And this is a bill that has very strong support from the disability rights community. There were 12 disability rights groups that did write a letter independent of the expert letter, and they sent that to the legislators and to the State Board of Election officials. And if you want to receive that, go ahead, or if you want any further follow-up information, you can just contact us at smartlegislation@gmail.com. And so I'm just putting that in the chat for those who have access to the chat. And I also did put some other links. You can get more information at smartlegislation.org. And there are the letters there that were signed by over 70, or I believe 70 experts and voting rights advocates, disability advocates, all signed on, civil rights advocates, many who've signed on in support of this bill. So it's an urgent bill. We encourage members to co-sponsor, specifically co-sponsor, let the leadership know that you want this to pass this session. This is our window. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We are here in Albany just the rest of the day today, and we can meet with you. Happy to answer any of your questions personally. Just before we log off, were there any questions that people would like, or would you like a meeting? Just put the time in the chat today and we can meet with you at your office. Any additional questions? Just going to give that a beat. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.